60 years ago, a southwest region of Japan was exposed to a heat 1,000 times the temperature of the sun. A heat created by man's most powerful bomb. This is the story of the world's first weapon of mass destruction, told by those that dropped the bomb and those that survived it. Hiroshima, tomorrow at 9 on BBC One.
Now on BBC One, the news with Darren Jordan.
Robin Cook, the former Foreign Secretary, has died suddenly. He was 59. The man, regarded as one of the finest political debaters, collapsed while walking in the Scottish Highlands. Tonight, friends and colleagues described him as a politician of principle with extraordinary talent.
But he was a man who made tremendous contribution to British politics. Indeed, I believe he was the greatest parliamentarian of our generation.
In other news, rescue teams race against time to help save the stricken Russian submarine. And on the verge of victory, England stage a dramatic fight back against Australia in the second Ashes Test. Good evening. Robin Cook, the former Foreign Secretary and one of the key figures in the Labour government which swept to power in 1997, has died. He was 59. Mr Cook collapsed while out hill walking in Scotland. He was airlifted to hospital in Inverness, where he was pronounced dead this afternoon. Robin Cook served as Foreign Secretary and then as Leader of the Commons, but he opposed Tony Blair's decision to go to war in Iraq and resigned in 2003, just days before the conflict started. Our political correspondent Sean Lay reports.
Robin Cook, Scottish Labour Party candidate, 22,000.
Robin Cook was re-elected to Parliament just 2 months ago. Although it was more than 2 years since he resigned from the Cabinet, he remained one of Labour's most recognisable and influential figures. An enthusiastic horseman and lover of the countryside, he'd enjoyed good health. But whilst walking on Ben Stack this afternoon, he collapsed. He was flown to Regmore Hospital in Inverness. This evening, a spokeswoman there confirmed that he had died.
I can confirm that Robin Cook was brought in by helicopter to Regmore Hospital this afternoon, was examined in Accident and Emergency Department and was pronounced dead at 5 minutes past 4.
His second wife, Gaynor, was with him at the time of the accident. Tonight, Tony Blair offered his sympathies to Mr Cook's widow and family. In a statement, Mr Blair, who's currently out of the country, said Robin was an outstanding, extraordinary talent, brilliant, incisive in debate, of incredible skill and persuasive power. His contribution to the politics of Britain was hugely significant. His contribution to the Labour Party was immense. That sentiment was echoed by Mr Blair's deputy, John Prescott.
He had a sharp intellect and an attention to detail that you couldn't ignore, Robin, whether he was on the front or the back benches. And when he resigned from the government, regretfully I feel, but he did it on principle, he did it with style, and he did it with elegance. And you know, this man will be sorely missed by the Labour Party and politics at home and abroad.
Robin Cook's 4 years at the Foreign Office made him a formidable critic when he decided to oppose the invasion of Iraq. His resignation from the Cabinet over the war won admiration even from political opponents. Such respect ensured he remained almost as influential outside government as he'd been within. Sean Lay, BBC News.
Well, we can talk to our correspondent, Colin Blaine, who's at Regmore Hospital in Inverness. Colin, what more are the authorities there saying about today's events?
Well, we now know, Darren, most of the detail of what happened. Robin Cook was on Ben Stack. He was near the summit when he collapsed suddenly, and it seems he had a heart attack. His wife, Gaynor, was on the trip with him, but the alarm was raised by a male companion. That happened about 23 minutes past 2, and very quickly a Coast Guard helicopter, which was in the air at the time, it was already on a training exercise, it was diverted to go and attend to Robin Cook. A winch was lowered because the helicopter couldn't land on the mountain. A winch was lowered. Robin Cook, by then unconscious, was taken up into the helicopter and it was flown to the hospital that you see behind me. That took about half an hour. He arrived shortly before 4 o'clock, and within a few minutes the doctors at Accident and Emergency had examined him, and at 4:05 he was pronounced dead. And we understand that a post-mortem will be held on Monday.
Colin, thank you. Well, Robin Cook entered the Commons aged 28 and came to be regarded as one of its finest debaters. Tonight, tributes were paid to him from across the political spectrum. The Conservatives called Mr Cook a politician of principle, and the Liberal Democrats said he was the most formidable parliamentarian of his generation. Carolyn Quinn reports.
In government at last, as Foreign Secretary.
Oh, not bad for the son of a chemist teacher.
Robin Cook's political ambitions coming to fruition with Labour's victory in 1997. From an early age, he'd been fascinated by politics. He entered Parliament in 1974 at the age of 28, working his way up through the shadow cabinet in the 1996 debate over the Scott report into arms to Iraq. As shadow Foreign Secretary, his forensic and debating skills helped demolish the credibility of John Major's government.
This is not just a government that does not know how to accept blame. It is a government that knows no shame.
I've no doubt that the way in which he dealt with that report in the House of Commons was undoubtedly his finest hour. He realised its significance and he utilised it to its maximum advantage.
Securing one of the top 4 cabinet posts in 1997, Robin Cook was one of the key figures around Tony Blair, who he'd stood against for the leadership back in 1994. Once in the Foreign Office, he announced an ethical foreign policy and was mocked by his opponents, particularly after a series of international controversies, including accusations that he turned a blind eye to arms being sent to Sierra Leone against international embargoes. Throughout his career, he'd been lampooned for his appearance and his lofty disdain.
I do not look like an I don't.
Anything you say, Robin?
I've always found that, frankly, rather amusing. I mean, I've never imagined that I got on in life by the way I looked. And it's never been that terribly important to me.
But his personal life suffered serious scrutiny after tabloid reports of his affair with his secretary, Gaynor Regan. He left his wife, Margaret. Later, he married Gaynor, saying she'd helped him discover his emotional intelligence. After Labour's second election victory in 2001, he reluctantly accepted the far less prominent post of Leader of the Commons. Still, he used that position to try to force through modernisation of Parliament and Lords reform. But it was Iraq that finally put an end to Robin Cook's cabinet career. In March 2003, on the eve of the war, he resigned in protest, he said, at the decision to commit Britain to military action without international or domestic support.
I intend to join those tomorrow night who vote against military action now. It is for that reason, and that reason alone, and with a heavy heart, that I've resigned from the government.
He did what people say they want politicians to do, which is to say what they think and to put their money in that case, put his job where his mouth was.
He was regarded as one of the cleverest parliamentarians of his generation, but away from politics, Robin Cook was renowned as a lover of horse racing and a keen tipster. Many had bet that he'd return to government under a Gordon Brown premiership. His political skills will be sorely missed. Carolyn Quinn, BBC News.
Well, our political correspondent, Sean Lay, joins me in the studio. Sean, we heard John Prescott there describe him as the greatest parliamentarian of his generation. How would you assess his contribution to British politics?
Well, I think what was most significant is that, leaving aside that in the aftermath of somebody's death in such circumstances, people will say kind things about a politician, is that there is a universal respect for Robin Cook right across the political spectrum. And one of the things he'd done is, like many of his contemporaries in the Labour Party, over 18 years in opposition, he changed his mind on some of the big political issues like Europe, like devolution. But he had the intellectual strength, the ability to argue a case that made his changing of his mind credible. And in that sense, I think he helped to make New Labour appealing and credible to the voters. And that was obviously so important in the run-up to the 1997 election.
And Sean, even after his resignation, he was still regarded as a significant figure, though, wasn't he?
Yes, he'd been, in a sense, sidelined and rather frustrated in his final years in the government. But he didn't make the mistake of perhaps some other former cabinet ministers in coming across as an embittered departee. He didn't make the mistake of engaging in personal criticism of Tony Blair, and he quietly rebuilt his relationship with Gordon Brown, which had been pretty poor for many, many years. And for that...
Well done. And are you really going to go home? It says Adrian, isn't it?
Yeah.
Going to get married?
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Definitely.
Fabulous. You've been wonderful. Well done, Stephen. And Chanel. Have a good night.
Excitement, adventure, exhilaration, sensation, adrenaline, your heart pounding, faster and faster, second by second. Come face to face with life on the edge, not knowing what will happen next. Open your eyes to something new. The new series of Blue Peter, weekdays on the CBBC channel. Are you ready for action? Get to the action on the CBBC channel. For more information, call 08700 10 10 10.
Hello there. Premiership football is back and so is Match of the Day with all 8 of the games played today. Lots of new faces, plenty of goals and a bit of summer madness. Join us later here on BBC One at 10:25.
For a big and important race, I will get into that zone. When it gets hard, I'll imagine that it's the end of the race and it gives you extra motivation to win.
Join Paula as she goes for gold in the marathon. The Athletics World Championships tomorrow from 12:05 on BBC One.
There's a new kind of entertainment show coming to BBC One and BBC Three. 8 young men facing the biggest challenge of their lives. And I'll be with them every step of the way. On this show, nobody gets voted out. In fact, we're going to finish the series with more people than we started. Join me, Davina McCall, for He's Having a Baby. Next Saturday at 6:35 on BBC One and throughout the week on BBC Three.
Swashbuckling action tomorrow night here on BBC One. Anthony Hopkins, Antonio Banderas and Catherine Zeta-Jones star in The Mask of Zorro at 8.